Coming up on Theater Talk.
Now, are they typical composer-lyricists? They steal your best book scenes and turn them into a show-stopping number?
Well, I wouldn't use the word steal. They borrow them.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
If I were a rich man, all day long I'd biddy bum. If I were a wealthy man.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins, and I am joined by my substitute co-host, Jesse Green, drama critic of New York Magazine, and the writer of the recent cover story on Audra McDonald in the big new theater season issue of New York Magazine, which also has 28 Reasons to Love New York. And one of them is here right now, and if you would introduce him and them, that would be great.
Here we have with us today from Fiddler on the Roof, which is a beautiful revival of a classic show, of course, director Bartlett Sher.
Hello, how are you?
And star of the show playing Tevye is Danny Burstein.
Great to be
Welcome.
here. Thanks.
Let's begin by talking about the difficulty of putting on a show that everybody knows. If it's even true that everybody knows it. Let me ask you, Danny, how can I assume that as a working actor for many years, this is a show that you had seen innumerable times and knew very well?
I've done it twice.
You've done it twice?
In community theater when I was 16, and when I was 21, I did it in summer stock with Theodore Bickel.
And Bart, obviously, it must have been something...
No, I'd seen it on tour in San Francisco, in what I'm pretty certain was the Robbins version, in like 1979 or so, 79, 80. And then I saw the most recent revival in 2004. And then I've seen the Zero Mostel version in the library.
So what inspired you to go, well, I'm just going to dump that Robbins version and do my own with Danny Burstein?
Well, there were a couple of things. The first part was Danny.
Yes.
The thing is, I would never have ever even begun to think about how to do it without a good Tevye, and because we'd worked together, before a couple of times, I knew that was a great start. The other was that I had worked with this particular choreographer, Hafez Schechter, on a new opera called Two Boys that Nico Muhly wrote. And as I was working on it, I was like, this guy might be really good for Fiddler, and went to the Robbins Foundation, who said, sure. That I was surprised, but they were up for a new version. Those two things made it feel like we could push us into some new territory.
When you are looking at a piece of work that was hailed from the beginning and has stood the test of time already, are you saying to yourself, what can I do to make a new mark on it? Or are you saying to yourself, how can I make people today look at it freshly? What's your first way in?
I don't say, oh, what's my new mark on it? I don't do it that way. I begin an exploration and begin like looking at the Shalom Aleichem and looking at stuff from the period and looking from the past. And I happen to be drawn to Fiddler personally because my father was born in Štedlin, Lithuania, but even though I was raised Catholic, it had always been this sort of story that was in the back of my experience. My grandfather coming over through Latvia, and they were in Lithuania, and this whole thing. And I knew enough about that experience that I wanted to explore it personally. But I found myself, I think what happens is that the new approach to it emerges through the work. So it became very clear that in looking at it carefully, that I was very drawn to 1905 as opposed to 1965. and the more I got further into the Shalom Aleichem and the stuff, the more other things came out of it. I think I became more interested in the sort of style of the piece from a point of view of the comedy from the 60s versus the naturalism. I was quite drawn to the book. I found the book quite rewarding and quite intelligent.
You mean the book of the musical?
The book of the musical, yeah. Joe Stein's book was there was a lot in there. And so I usually begin the thing with a point of view that's based on exploration of the text of it as itself. And then out of that usually emerges. I do have a point of view that means I have to figure out what the immediate significance of the piece is right now in 2015, 2016. And that's something I'm always looking for. I don't have an answer to it, but I'm always looking for it.
Right. That's one of the great things I love about working with you, actually. He always is looking for a way in.
But Danny, as an actor, particularly in the kind of pivotal role in the piece, do you have to have the same way in? I mean, do you have to sort of buy into the director's overall view, or are you working on your own narrative and your own way to find?
Well, of course, I have a different job, of course, and I do my own exploration. I'd known about this piece, or that we might be doing the piece, for about 2.5 years, definitely a year before we started rehearsal. And so I read every Shalom Aleichem story. I did tons of research. Also went to the New York City Lincoln Center Library, and also saw the Jerome Robbins video, which was fascinating, with Zero Mostel. It was the
77, yeah.
revival at the Winter Garden.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
What were you reacting, I don't want to say against, but in terms of not wanting to base your thinking about this show on the period in which it first showed up in New York, but rather its original provenance?
I think the misunderstanding is like that philosophically, there's not some point of view I'm bringing to it. There's an approach I bring to what I do when I make the work. So like, I set in motion a way of analyzing it, a way of exploring it, which in my case usually means deeper attention to the naturalism of the text. I might be less interested in the quote jokes as they might be there. I might be looking more at some historical context that might inform it differently. So if you take something like Matchmaker, which people seem to feel I've done completely differently, the truth is, if I'm exploring it, I didn't know how else to do it, because I'm asking, what are the stakes in the song for these girls, and what are they facing? So I head into it that way, because otherwise I feel like the plot doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think we should say at this point that Matchmaker is a song that, let's say traditionally, is a comedy charm number.
Yes.
Near the beginning of the show, in which we, get amusing reflections.
And they throw brooms around, and it's a very joyful song.
Right.
And that was how Robbins entered it. I didn't try to think about how he entered it. I just really looked at the text and looked at the situation the girls were in, and found, Zeidel has a huge problem on her hands, and tried to set it in motion.
Playing with matches, a girl can get burned.
Sheldon, the first time he saw the staging, said that I didn't realize I'd written the word terrified in that song.
We're talking about Sheldon Harnick, the lyricist,
For Matchmaker.
who's 90 and was quite
he was very supportive and wonderful in the
process.
show. But the thing was that he said, "Oh, I've never seen it like that," and it threw me, because I was like, "Well, how else would you do it?" I mean, maybe it's from doing too much Shakespeare, but the whole problem of fathers forcing their kids to get married is pretty much 2,000 to 3,000 years old in terms of drama. And so I was following up on what I knew from Terence to Shakespeare to Moliere to whatever, and it's very helpful to kind of see that Tevye stands in the same sort of line of like, I don't want to marry that boy.
Now, Danny, I'm interested that you said you watched the Zero Mostel 1977 tape.
All day long I'd biddy bum if I were a wealthy man.
Your interpretation is so different. You're in no way imitating Mostel.
No, I didn't want to imitate anybody.
But it was interesting that you could watch that and then cast that off, because we have seen so many Mostel imitators.
Sure. For me, it's all information that I try and glean something from, and then I basically forget about it and try on the first day of rehearsal to make it as honest and real as possible. One of the weird and wacky things about working with Bart is, for about the first 2 weeks, you throw the comedy out the window, and you just deal with the reality.
Is that terrifying, though?
It is, because you find safety in comedy.
Yeah, of course.
And comedy is something that really needs to be honed. It's a ballet, and you really have to work on it and set it and find it. And so not working on it and just finding the reality of that particular situation, what is in the text, is a bit off
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unsettling.
And I'm just going for the truthfulness of the situations
Exactly. But-
only, and then from there we build up and then start setting where the comedy is going to come.
Did
Exactly.
you do that when you did South Pacific and Danny played Luther Billis?
There is nothing like a day.
Yeah.
Did you do it without the comedy at some point?
We did. Oh, in
I mean,
the
you
very
always
beginning.
do it.
Sure.
You always do it from the point of view of the stakes in the scene, and then you're building up. Danny's very good at being funny, so that's going to happen anyway, and then you build up from there. And the other thing about the '77 version, I wanted to see how Robbins was operating the piece. You know, how you get from scene to scene, what Aronson was doing, what those front cloth drops were like, how the movement and texture of the piece is moving, so that as I'm developing a design, you want to keep the momentum of the piece operating, because I tend to think that a lot of these shows are spatial as much as anything else. The Shakespeare stage was a spatial, he was writing for a space that could go from above to below and switch very quickly. And in these cases, these musicals, often what the original design was informs you something about how they were writing, or why they went suddenly to a front cloth number and went back from there to something else. And I just wanted to see how the machine of the piece operated.
But I felt in places like, for instance, The Dream, that you were going, well, I'm not doing that.
No.
I'm going to do something else. You didn't do that, right?
No, all I do is, and I did The Dream like 1,000 times, he can tell you.
Sure.
I really don't operate like that. I just take it from what the object of the text is in front of me and explore.
But Bart, let's talk about the famous thing that everyone talks about. You know, and I get that you go into a show as an exploration, but a philosophy arises from that.
Yes,
you know,
correct.
even if you didn't start that way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not really offering
Yeah.
anything. It has to. So one of the things you offer in this production, we begin untraditionally with Danny's character,
Yeah.
Tevye, in the famous red
Parka.
LL Bean, everyone
Yeah.
says, I don't know if it is or not. Parka with a train station sign in Cyrillic saying Anatevka.
Correct.
And a guidebook, or what appears to be a guidebook. It's not specified, and it's only a
Yeah.
few seconds.
Well, so I'm kind of going out of order. So if I do all the exploration of the text and I'm looking at it before I start rehearsal, I do develop some ideas about it. One of the interesting things we worked with a rabbi, Larry Hoffman, who worked with us. We talked a lot about the generations of identity. So much of our politics and sense of ourselves now are based on some people call identity politics. The question of identity, of who I am in relationship to this world, 50 years since it was done, was a central question I was asking myself. So the train station, the man today, exploring his identity or going back, and sort of became layered. And I start with an idea and then see where the idea is going. Some ways with Danny's help, because Danny would say, this doesn't make sense to me, let's try this. And then the end it felt very important to me, and also we were hugely influenced by the Syrian refugee crisis. We had the worst refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. Where do people go, and what are the circumstances under which they're driven out of their own homes and have to go somewhere else? And that idea of joining the line, stepping from now or whatever into the past and putting yourself in the circumstances of your ancestors, your people. And that was a very important question for me to ask now. And I hear kids in the audience, I have children, you can hear them literally asking questions like, Dad, what is a pogrom? What is this? They know much less than, say, a generation did in '65. They're not as close to World War II. They're not as close to their own parents coming out. And I wanted a frame for them to enter the piece. And so that is, I'm sort of saying both things at the same time. It's partly an exploration, and the exploration develops a point of view. And that was a serious and important point of view for me. And not everybody agrees with it, and I'm fine with that. And some people really don't like it. But I'm glad that they asked the question of what it means to them.
I think it's enough justification for me personally that it's moving, but it also does what you say. I mean, it forces you, if you are already familiar with the story, it forces you to expand what the story of refugeeism means.
Correct.
And if you're not familiar, it makes you think about just how momentous this sort of change has been in history. But one of the things why do you think people resist? And also, I wonder, do you ever feel the resistance?
Definitely at the top of the show, I would say.
What do you sense? How does it come to you?
I sense confusion. I sense people asking questions.
Can you hear like?
Sure, at the very top of the show, no doubt about it, because this is not, it's not your grandfather's Fiddler.
Right.
And they know it, and they're expecting that, and it throws them.
And it's important that they be placed. They be placed a little out of their comfort zone at the beginning. Right. It forces them, and maybe Brechtian in some way, forces them to stand back and evaluate a very quick question of like, what do I expect Fiddler to be? What do I expect a piece of theater that I knew well to be? Mm-hmm. You know, and the laws of interpretation or hermeneutics or however we want to go into it are complex, but that you have very few times within the evening of, say, a 2-hour show where you can really push an audience into a place where they are like thrown off and still slightly positive. And one of them's at the beginning, you know, where they're fresh to the piece and they've just sat down and they're like, wait a minute. The great part is that they do have a wonderful history with Fiddler. Like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't ask these questions if there wasn't a rich response.
Well, it wouldn't have been disruptive of anything if they didn't have something.
And I love how much people are devoted to the show. That makes a huge difference when you feel people are responding and actively connecting to it.
Were you surprised or concerned about whether the book, as it is written, it's a very tight book. It's like those scenes are engineered within an inch of their lives. Were you concerned whether it would, you know, have enough air in it to admit these other ways of thinking about it?
It's very, very tight. It's such a high level of skill in the creators. Those guys were
geniuses.
Brilliant. And they really honed it. I think where I found myself enjoying the text the most was when I got sort of to the last scenes, the goodbye scenes with Yenta and the kids and Hava. Those scenes suddenly get a little bit longer, and you suddenly have a little bit more richness. And so you've placed in where you could tell they were really struggling with how to say goodbye, with what this whole thing meant. And then when you're placed, those scenes surprised me when I got there. You know, how smart they are, and just enough. I think if they were longer, it would be trickier, but they're very emotional and powerful scenes, and the goodbyes are very profound. And it's a little bit like, I don't know, some kabuki exercise where the goodbye of Laser Wolf has to be exactly right. You have this set of lines and this, like, where you go in Chicago, blah, and you can feel the sort of ancient, like, thousands of Laser Wolves who've struggled over exactly how to get that paragraph right. And that's kind of fun.
That ending is so gripping, Danny, and it must be just such an emotional workout for you every night.
It is.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. It's the most physically and emotionally exhausting show I've ever done. It takes a lot of stamina. It does.
And then when you're done, is it hard to shake it off? Or?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I was actually warned about
beard.
that. I still got the beard. It's not even mine.
Yeah.
It is. It's exhausting. Actually, I was warned about that by Alfred Molina.
Oh, interesting.
And he said he would go home and he couldn't sleep. And yeah, you have to find a way to go, okay, I'm walking out of the
People think it's a jolly kind of business going on. But why would they think that when you look at what happens to these people in this show?
Yeah. And yet it's beautiful and uplifting. And there are new things that that Hofesh did in the choreography, in the circle, that, you know, movements that are proud. So they go off in a positive way.
Yeah.
Are they fun to do? Is it fun to do those movements?
It is.
Yeah.
He's a genius. I love him.
Really brilliant.
Really, you know, he looks like the kind of guy who'd, you know, change the oil in your car. And yet he's this genius choreographer.
He's a real choreographer in the sense he has his own very specific sense of movement.
Without a doubt.
And so he has to train those dancers to move his way.
Yeah.
And they were trained and trained. We did 2-week workshop so that all of those gestures of prayer, or they're very specific to, like in ballet, the body's, you know, the center's higher, his is lower, where it is in their legs. They had to really train to learn his way. We all sort of worked with him. And then he would do very simple things that were, you know, extremely profound and beautiful. And that was it comes from a different place, you know. Very few people, you know, he was in the Israeli army for 2 years at a desk in Tel Aviv dancing all the time. But, you know, he knew how to teach the Cossacks how to hold their guns.
A not-to-be-missed experience, Fiddler on the Roof at the Broadway Theater. I want to thank you, Jesse, drama critic of New York Magazine, read his cover story about Audra McDonald and the 28 Things to Love in New York Theater right now online. Before we end the show, we're going to look back at an interview we did with the original creators of Fiddler on the Roof, Sheldon Harnick, and the late Joseph Stein and Jerry Bock, and just have a few moments of them talking about what it was to create the show and how open they are to new interpretations. Good night, Danny. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tevye, the milkman, wonderful, and Bartlett Sher, the director of Fiddler on the Roof.
Thank you.
Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man?
I am very happy tonight to be joined by the men who gave us one of the great musicals of all time. Jerry Bock, who wrote the score to Fiddler on the Roof.
Michael.
Sheldon Harnick, the lyrics. And Joe Stein, the book. Gentlemen, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Take us back to when you were writing Fiddler on the Roof. Whose idea was it? How did you guys all get together? And how did it come about, really?
Well, somebody sent me a novel called Wandering Star by Sholem Aleichem.
Mm-hmm.
I read it and I loved it. I gave it to Jerry, who loved it. We gave it to Joe, and Joe said it's too big. It's just too sprawling. It covers decades. It would have a massive cast. But since we love the writing, let's look at some more work by Sheldon Aleichem.
That's substantially true. And I remember the stories of Tevye that I'd heard as a child. And after some digging, we finally found this. The material was out of print at the time, but we subsequently located a copy of the book. It was called The Old Country. And there were the stories of, they were all monologues by Tevye speaking to the author. And we picked 3 brief monologues as the basis for the story that is now Fiddler on the Roof.
And musically, Jerry, what was the style that you...
There was not one song in the original Sholem Aleichem story.
Your contribution.
Okay.
Did you hear the sound of the music, so to speak, as soon as you were reading these?
It's hard to explain, but I guess I grew up all my life favoring the minor key in terms of classical music, in terms of folk music, in terms of even little songs my grandmother used to sing me. But I never had the opportunity to express that musically in any of the shows we did. And when this opportunity arrived, it was like a fountain that was starting to run.
What was the first song you guys put together for Fiddler?
Well, when we read the material, our thinking was, whatever Joe does, let's look at these stories and see which scenes have to stay in the show. And one of them we thought that has got to be there no matter what we do is Tevye's dream. So we thought, let's do that first. And Jerry had given me a tape with a lot of music on it, and there was one piece of music that just sounded absolutely right for the dream. So we started with that.
Now, are they typical composer-lyricists? They steal your best book scenes and turn them into a show-stopping number?
Well, I wouldn't use the word steal. They borrow them.
It's very important to us to take advantage of our wonderful book writer, because we mean to get as close to the book as possible and go from scene to song in a kind of hopefully seamless
And are there
way.
scenes you wrote that then became songs in the show?
Inevitably, that always happens, or parts of scenes, or parts of dialogue. But that's, the word for that is collaboration.
Give us a sense now, when you were doing the original production, you had 2 titanic personalities, Jerry Robbins and Zero Mostel. I mean, were you guys sort of basically doing what you were told from these guys? Could you stand up to them?
For one thing, they were gigantic personalities, but they liked the material. There was very little problem about the material. I mean, there were the usual discussions and stuff, but there was no hostility. There was no struggle about what kind of show we're going to do. We all saw the same show from the very beginning. So it was, and the original score and the original script changed a lot, but the basic line remained the same from beginning to end.
Did you have any idea what a massive hit this would be?
No.
No.
No,
It just
of course
overtook you opening night.
We
No.
loved the stories. We thought they were very beautiful. And we thought if we do our job right, and if we realize the beauty and the humor and the humanity that's in those stories, maybe with luck we'll run a year or two.
To life,
To life,
L'chaim,
l'chaim,
L'chaim.
to life.
Life has a way of confusing us, blessing and bruising us.
Drink l'chaim,
To life,
to life,
L'chaim,
l'chaim,
L'chaim.
to life. If you've been lucky, then Monday was no worse than Sunday was.
Drink l'chaim to life. God would like us to be joyful, even when our hearts lie panting on the floor.
How much more can we be joyful when there's really something to be joyful for? To life, l'chaim, 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 to life. A gift we seldom are wise enough.
Ever to prize enough.
Drink l'chaim,
L'chaim
to life.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you,